John, we're joined by one of our most frequent guests, but also one of our favorite guests, Ron Darling.
Love to have Darling on. Such a smart guy, brings incredible insight to the game of baseball, and it's wonderful to have him on his 65th birthday as well.
Yeah, we'll be talking about the somewhat sinking but maybe rising again Mets, the certainly rising Nolan McLean, a lot about pitching. You and I are going to discuss the AL MVP race, Cal Raleigh, Aaron Judge, what we think about it. We'll talk a little about where the Yankees are right now. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. Well, John, another week of baseball, and we're going to start in a different way this week because I think you put either the brew in ha 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 or the ha 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 in brew. You told me, like we were texting with each other about what to do in the A block, and you mentioned, I'll read the text. Not a lot of words, right? You said fairly the big dumper. If nobody knows, that's Cal Raleigh, the catcher of the Mariners, is the AL MVP leader at the moment. Can never count out Aaron Judge, an all-time great. But a great defensive catcher with the major league homer and RBI lead is a compelling case. And you told me that you did what I always tell you not to do, that it was, you clearly were looking at mentions and stuff. You said it caused a bit of a stir. Obviously, a lot of people, Judge leads the world in homer and average on base percentage, slugging, OPS, walks, etc. Go ahead, John. Why is Cal Raleigh the American League MVP with a quarter of a season left? We should note, and a lot to still accomplish for both teams and both players.
Yeah, I didn't even look at the odds. Apparently, Judge is a slight favorite. I'm just giving my opinion that right now, to me, Raleigh is slightly ahead. The reason I believe that he's the MVP is, I know everybody looks at the stats and they're comparing and Judge is ahead and all these little other categories, not little, these are the big categories. Uh, but it's partly about the narrative too. We're talking about a catcher, and you can't always, people are now picking on the defensive metrics aren't as great as they usually are. To have a catcher with those kind of stats is an amazing advantage. It is so valuable because the average catcher, I know it's a little bit up this year, thanks to him and Will Smith. The average catcher has an OPS plus well below 100, well below. Is it 90? It's somewhere in that 90 category, usually year after year, or even a little bit lower than that, right? So to have a catcher who's having not only an excellent year, a record-breaking year, to me is a compelling case to have him slightly in front. I'm not criticizing Aaron Judge. He is fantastic. No, it's not his fault that he was out for a couple weeks. He is having a typically incredible season. If someone tells me the MVP, he's the MVP, I'm okay with it. I think it's very, very close. And as I said, it's currently, to me, Raleigh, having that catcher with those kind of numbers, he's going to break the record for home runs by a catcher. At least when I wrote it, he was leading in RBIs in the major leagues. To me, that is just so, so valuable. I also think the Yankees, to me, I know they're both teams are in playoff position right now, having similar records, but the Yankees have been slightly disappointing. It's not his fault. Judge is the best. I think he's the best position player in baseball, but MVP right now, to me, I would vote for Raleigh if I had that vote.
John, this always is easy when you deal with, for me, people who are angry about this. It's usually fan bases, right? And I'll
Right.
always just say, well, let's just act like Cal Raleigh was doing this for the Yankees and Aaron Judge was doing this for the Mariners. If you were a Yankee fan, you'd be screaming, how can you not make a catcher with 46 homers the MVP, right? This is just progressives and conservatives, whatever side of the divide you're on, you see it through those lenses. If you're going to make it a war argument, and Judge leads in war, I always start with what war? Baseball reference. He's 6'9", Raleigh's 5'7". Fangraphs war 7-4 to Raleigh's 7. So like we can't even agree what war is. I know what batting average is. I know what on-base percentage is, but and again, if you're going to go by war and you're a Yankee fan, so you look at the war, I'd say, okay, let's go look at the war. We need to revoke Thurman Munson's MVP. Didn't even lead the Yankees in war. Mickey Rivers did in 76, and George Brett was way ahead of him. We have to revoke all three of Yogi's a catching MVPs because again, Mantle almost always led him on his team, and there's years where Ted Williams led the league in WAR. So, like, if you're going to make strictly a WAR argument, it's going to be hard probably for a catcher to win it. I know you said, Raleigh I think has won the Platinum Glove in the past. I think last year, right? He's still fourth in if whatever Fangraphs WAR defense is, he's fourth in it for among catchers, and his durability is spectacular. Like he catches, he's catches every game. Do you know he actually has 14 stolen bases? Judge has
Yep.
7. Look, Judge, there's a great argument for both. And John, I actually think you made a key point, which is the two teams, as we're speaking, are tied. There's three teams tied for the three wild cards. There are a couple of games ahead of Kansas City and the Guardians. Like what happens down the stretch here is going to matter for this race. I think it's very close. I think a compelling case, your word, I think was a good word, could be made for both sides. But to act like this is a runaway one way or the other is ridiculous. Raleigh is clearly in this race.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. Again, I don't think the catching war is fair. If a guy's catching, first of all, it's a liability. It's very difficult to hit when you're catching, right? That's part of the reason that catchers historically have had far worse numbers than certainly right fielders, but every other position. So I think it's debilitating catching, but it just historically catchers do not do that well. So if you have offensively, so if you have a catcher with big numbers, it is immensely valuable. Look how many games Mike Piazza's teams won because of his numbers. I think Will Smith, now obviously Ohtani is way in front in MVP, but Will Smith has been exceedingly valuable to the Dodgers and certainly has a case in the top group. Well, Ohtani's probably going to win that one, or certainly is going to win that at this point. But I think people are undervaluing the idea of catcher, and your point is excellent. Yogi Berra's career WAR was like 65 or something like that, right? There are a ton of players who've never won an MVP who have comparable WAR. Buddy Bell, Willie Randolph. There are a lot of players. WAR does not properly judge catching defense and the value of it. The value is enormous. It's judging it versus other catchers and how is he replacing other catchers, whatever. It's not fair to Raleigh to say that his WAR is only 5.7 or 7. I don't think it really underestimates his value to that team. Take him off that team, see what the Mariners look like. Certainly they have a better offense now that they've acquired Naylor and Suarez, but I mean, their lineup didn't look that great before. Now it does. But I mean, I think it's partly the narrative. And that's why at this moment, and things can change, it's obviously very, very close. Judge has been, as usual, amazing player. To me, I'd vote Raleigh. Where would you go? Where would you go? I mean, you said
Yeah, I think
compelling.
I
How would
think
you?
I think I'm with you. I think right now, with a quarter of a season left, and both teams in position to either, both teams could make a run and win their divisions. Both teams could be the top wild card, and both teams could fall out of it. And so I think what happens and what these two guys do the rest of the way. If I was forced to vote today, I'd vote for Raleigh. And I guess this will be one of those places where people talk about the New York bias, right? Here's two people based in New York who are talking about Cal Raleigh from as far away as you could get on our map, and still play Major League Baseball. And we think with three-quarters of the season done, he's the American League MVP by a sliver. And I think, John, as great a job as you've just done detailing doing this as a catcher, I think in some ways you undersell it because I think it's tougher to be a catcher today than ever before because they put so much, there used to be a game plan that a catcher had for an entire lineup. Now catchers have to have game plans in their heads for 9 hitters in the lineup, very detailed. It's never been harder to catch the pitches that are coming, the velocity, the movements, the shapes, etc. Plus, they have to go hit. And by the way, if you'd like to know how tough that is, Austin Wells' carrying card as a Yankee was going to be his bat, right? That's what he was going to do. And I actually think he showed last year. I think there is a very good hitter in Austin Wells, and he can't hit this year. It's like the catching has completely taken it out of him. The mental, physical duress of doing that job, the toughest job on the field, and doing it in equipment. I'm watching them play in St. Louis the other day, John, where it's like 100 degrees with 90% humidity, like, and you're catching and you're going to lose 5 to 7 pounds during the game. to do what Raleigh is doing offensively by while still being in the top quarter of defensive catchers and being durable at a position that kills its young. I mean, it is impressive. And to think that at minimum he isn't neck to neck with a right fielder, obviously an historic right fielder who has actually DH'd more games this year than Raleigh, is just to look through things with pinstriped glasses. It is a very close race. Judge is going to finish no worse than second, which means like a fifth top four or six, whatever it is. Like he's a great player. He's a great historic player. This is a neck and neck race, and it's another race within the playoff race. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I know you've told me to not look at dimensions, but I will say a very good point about the biases. Look, right, we're both in New York. I'm technically in New Jersey now, but we're basically New Yorkers. We're lifelong New Yorkers for the most part. You are. I've actually moved away occasionally, but we're basically lifelong New Yorkers. And all these people who are fans who have a bias are accusing me of having an anti-New York bias, which is crazy. These probably the same people, or maybe other people, have always accused me of having a New York bias. I try not to have a bias. Everybody has biases, but I'm trying not to. But I certainly don't have an anti-New York bias or an anti-Judge bias. Go back and look at my history of comments or articles about Judge. And then people have tried to claim that in 2017, which I barely remember, you probably remember it better than I do. You're very good about that. They claim that I was favoring Altuve or something like that at that point. I don't have any recollection of this. I mean, I've looked back on that and thought it was basically a dead heat. And Judge, I kind of think that Judge was probably a little bit ahead, if anything. So I don't know. They had some thought that I'm now all about home runs. I wasn't about home runs then. I like someone to find where I said home runs are important. First of all, that's ridiculous.
John, you're
Second of
driving
all,
yourself
I don't
crazy.
think I ever favored Altuve in that race. I mean, I think it was basically a dead heat. I know for whatever it's worth, and I don't think WAR is very precise, as you've just gone over very accurately. They both had an 8.1 WAR from what I saw. As people bring it up to me. So I don't know. They're trying to look at me as being hypocritical or something about this. Home runs are important, but to me, the key factor is what we've talked about. The guy's catching. It's a very difficult spot. I saw Torrens play a game 3 plays in a row. He got hurt on. He got a foul tip to his knee, a foul tip to his hand. Then the batter hits in the back of the head. I mean, it's not easy doing it as a catcher, and that it's been proven historically that it's not. So, I'm giving that a big part of this discussion is that he's doing it as a catcher and how valuable that is. Because if you have a catcher like that, your right fielder is probably going to hit. If you have a right fielder who hits, you're probably going to have a catcher who doesn't hit.
Yeah. John, look, I think there's over 8 billion people on the planet. If five are bringing up something from the 2017 AL MVP race, I would just move on and not you mean too much to me, John, as a friend and colleague, for your mental health to be attacked like this by five trolls. So like, why don't we show some of this New York bias? Ron Darling's going to be our guest, so we're going to talk a lot of Mets. Why don't we just end this segment? The Yankees have won two series in a row. Aaron Judge's team. He's not back in right field yet, which I think is a big issue because either him or Stanton could play every day. I know Stanton's played some right field, but it's been hard for him to stay on the field as usual. His body just won't allow it to field. John, I want to say that I think this is a very, very important week for the Yankees, and I wonder if you agree. They've got two against Tampa. We're doing this on Tuesday morning. They play Tuesday, Wednesday in their home away from home at Steinbrenner Field. But then they play four against the Red Sox. And John, it's never going to be 2003, 2004 again. Once the Red Sox broke the curse, that part of the fury in the rivalry went away. But the Yankees, in a way, were the fodder to allow the Red Sox to get back in this season. The Red Sox were under 500, and then in about a 10-day period, they went 5-1 against the Yankees. They swept the Yankees. That started the Yankees. That's the June 13th period for the Yankees. It started the Yankees on their nosedive. It started the Red Sox on their ascent. As we're talking, they're tied in the standings. I think the four games this weekend at Yankee Stadium, I don't like to talk about vital series, But at some point, the Yankees are going to have to prove they could beat a good team, they could beat a good team in their division, and that they can beat the Red Sox. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Red Sox are very tough. And again, people are going to accuse me of an anti-New York bias. I picked the Red Sox to win this division at the beginning because of what I thought was going to be a big second half with the youth. And certainly Anthony looks good. The other two ones in the minors, one's hurt, but of the big three stars that they did have. But obviously, Crochet's been great, not quite as great lately, but I think that they're a very, very tough team. And certainly the Yankees they take care of business. They killed the Twins and the Cardinals as expected. Generally, Twins did win a game miraculously, but I do think it is big. Toronto is not a given as the division champion, and it's big to win the division championship. It is. It's much better not to be a wild card. So I do think it is important, and I would like to see the Yankees, not meaning in a way of a fan, but I would for them to show how good they are to start beating better teams. I do think they are on the upswing. We go back and forth every week, right? Sometimes it's the Mets, sometimes the Yankees. At this point, it feels like the Yankees are in a better spot, right? They have a better finishing schedule generally, other than these Red Sox games, and they have to go back to Boston as well. But they seem like they have a better rotation situation going on. Judge is back. I think Stanton will still play some in the outfield, maybe in Tampa, where it's a bigger, smaller outfield. So they're in a good situation overall. But you're right; they need to prove they can beat some of the better teams.
John, I think a big issue for them is Judge getting back in right field. It just sets up their lineup. So their defense is better. It sets up their lineup. You and I have been around forever. We've been lied to by the Yankees for multiple decades about injuries. So I'll kind of believe that Aaron Judge will play right field when I see him play right field. I assume he will again, but who knows? They guard it like it's a state secret. They don't like to offend Judge, who doesn't want his stuff out on the street. It doesn't seem to matter to anyone that the fans might like to know if their best player is playing right field. I wonder if that family that makes the trip once a year from Rochester to Yankee Stadium would like to know if Judge is playing or not before they put their foot on a gas pedal. I guess the Yankees don't give a crap about them much. But yeah, I think it's an important issue because I actually think Ben Rice is really good. And I think a Judge, Ben Rice, Stanton middle of the lineup is really poisonous to other teams. And they're best poised when all three are in the lineup. And I think Rice has earned the right to catch or play first base almost every day. And I think that's a little dynamite in the middle of the lineup. And the only way it could really, really happen every day is if Judge could get back to right field.
Yeah, Rice, absolutely. And they know it. He needs to be in that lineup every day. He is a fantastic hitter. I mean, it's now catching up to the metrics. The hard hit rate and all that stuff was telling us he's one of the best. And now he's up there. You can see it in terms of the home run percentage and other stats. He definitely needs to be in that lineup. And look, we've been criticizing the Yankees about not doing the little things. Teams can win with the big things. You can win by having the most home runs. They do have the most home runs. They are the most powerful team. They can homer their way into the World Series. They did it last year, and certainly in the American League, that gives them an advantage too. The Mets are going to, even if they do get in, I think they probably will get in. They have a gauntlet. The National League probably has the four best teams, maybe the five best teams. Although I'm losing a little faith in the Cubs lately. It feels like they have the four best teams, and it's the Yankees. They got another shot to get in, and then again in the World Series, they're going to have to prove the fundamentals if they get there.
Yeah, I will say this as we close the segment here, John. They've had it's going to be close to like at least a 25 homer, 25 steal August. That should be their goal every month. They should be a 20-20 team, and the 20 homers is usually easy for them. But it's like for about 7 weeks, they forgot they're allowed to steal bases. Like seems like they have meetings about meetings. In one of those meetings, somebody probably should have stood up and said, "Hey, between first and second or second and third, we could run." Every once in a while, I guess during those meetings they were too busy doing rah-rah stuff to be able to do that. But anyway, we're going to keep the New York bias going and certainly our bias going. One of our favorite guys to deal with in every way at the network, at Citi Field, and just a friend of the show is Ron Darling, and he'll be joining us next on the show. John and I are so thankful this week to be joined by our colleague at MLB Network, our friend Ron Darling. And Ron, I could go to, most people know you for the 20 years you spent in an iconic booth with Gary and Keith. Just want to mention this because you turned 65 today, and a lot of fans might not remember you as a player. I wonder how many players in the history of baseball finished top five for a Cy Young, top five for a Rookie of the Year, won a Gold Glove, was an All-Star, and won a World Series game. That's a pretty you're self-effacing and humble, but when I looked at it, I said, that's a pretty interesting fivesome. Ron Darling, thank you for joining us on the show and happy birthday.
Well, that's very nice of you. I mean, I don't think of those days anymore. I mean, they were great times. I always thought my strength was probably a lot like you two, and that we grind it out, we get it done, we're there every day, and that's kind of like was my strength as a pitcher. Just a short note. So a buddy of mine, Ben Boma, who does the stats for Kenny Albert when they do the Fox Sports shows. And he sent me something the other day because the Mets, of course, are going through this little period where they can't get 6 innings from their starters. And he just sent me something just to show how the game has changed, but also it made me feel great. And that was that in 1986, I rattled off 23 straight 6 innings or more starts, 28 that total year and 86. So I know it was a different game. But it was still important to go deep into games just like it is today.
You are self-effacing, as Joel mentioned. You're a terrific all-around athlete. You're a great defensive player. You could hit a little bit. No, a little bit's a lot for a pitcher too. So you don't brag, but we'll do it for you on your 65th birthday. So we got to ask you the question to ask is what the heck happened? What's going on with the Mets? I mean, yeah, I will note Brian Wu 24 games in a row this year to start the season is an all-time great. I mean, there's only a few people who've done that to start a season. You 23 is amazing, but the Mets went through a long stretch and are still basically going through the stretch where only Peterson throws the 6 innings, but the whole team has not been particularly good. They had the best pitching in baseball for half a year. Next quarter, almost the worst. What are we? Are you as shocked as all of us? How could this go on?
I don't think I'm totally shocked. I think that you guys watch closely. The Mets were probably, as a pitching staff, not as good as the 2.50 ERA they carried for a couple of months. And they're certainly not as bad as they are pitching now. So they're somewhere in between all of that. That being said, it's really an interesting way. It's interesting on trying to judge this team. I mean, is it one of the best 10 teams, 8 teams in baseball, or because of the pitching staff's incredible pitching in the first 2 months, it's hard to judge them. I thought coming out of spring training, like many, that the depth of their lineup, and that included Vientos, who's had a tough year, the depth of their lineup would be their strength, and that their pitching would kind of have to hold on. I think what has happened to them, and you guys know this better than I probably, is that David Stearns, their president of baseball operations, so smart, but kind of has he has a kind of a mantra, and that is that he wants to do exactly what was done opposite of the Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander acquisitions right before he got here, and that is try to buy, especially the starting pitching, cheap. Try to get guys to rebound in their careers, have the pitching lab that they have set up in Port St. Lucie help these guys overcome any deficiencies that they have. And the hedge bet on all of this is that they will respond. Last year, Minaya and Severino, they became aces at different times in the year, Minaya at the end of the year. That hasn't been the case this year.
Well, Ron, I wonder if I can follow on that. I wonder what you think of the philosophy. Like if they went to the top of the market this year, I'm not sure, is Max Fried a good buy or a bad buy? I know Corbin Burns needed Tommy John. Blake Snell's now pitching great again, but it's only 5 or 6 starts all year. If you did it and you had a big market team, Would you delve into that marketplace, or is that a marketplace that is just, you better develop it and figure out how to do it cheaper?
100%. I'm on the latter part. And I love pitchers and I love pitching, and I would love to go out and get today's flavor and make sure you litter your team with those great pitchers. But you're not assured of what kind of seasons they're going to have. I mean, when we talk about free agent contracts, we talk about one guy, Max Scherzer. Now we talk about Zach Wheeler, that have come and been worth every single penny. There's not many others that we talk about like that. So yes, I think I would be into really trying to acquire those guys that are on the margins, that have had good past years, and trying to redevelop them in your system, and then start drafting guys. The Mets just had this young kid, Nolan McLean, pitch on Saturday. Those are the kind of hopefuls that you want someday. Really big, athletic pitchers that have a chance maybe to flourish and thrive and stay healthy.
What do you think? Is this salvageable? Those last 50 games or so were so terrible that I think a lot of people are fairly worried about the situation.
Yeah, it is salvageable, especially if McLean ends up being Marty Bystrom from 1980 with the Philadelphia Phillies. On 5-0 in September, or Mel Stottlemyre, who came up in the 60s, and I think Mel went 9-3 or 9-4 down the stretch. So certainly it is salvageable, because you can't see Senga pitching the same way he's pitched. You can't see Manaea not pitching better than he's pitched so far. That's 3/5 of the rotation. Do they have some problems with homes and innings and all that? Of course they do. But I believe, and definitely could be wrong, but I believe that the game you saw on Sunday night in Williamsport is how the Mets are going to win going down the stretch. It's home runs, it's lots of runs, it's 7-3, 7-4 kind of ball games. That's how I see them winning down the stretch. If they hit like we came out of spring training thinking they would, then I think all of this is salvageable, because bad pitching, we can overlook it as long as the team's putting 6-7 runs out there a game.
You invoked his name a few times, Nolan McLean. We've been waiting for them to bring up one of their big prospects this season. He actually pitched against Brian Wu on Seattle on Saturday and outpitched him. 5 1/3 shutout innings, 2 singles, 8 strikeouts. We're not going to get better expert eyes than yours, Ron, on what you think and trying to project it forward. I will say this. I rode down in the elevator to the clubhouse after the game with Jerry DiPoto, who's a former major league pitcher and runs baseball operations. And he just said to me, we looked at each other and I said, McLean, huh? And he goes, when you could spin it like that, especially behind in the count, that's not a mirage. It's not one time. I wonder what you think.
Oh, 100%. I'm really like Jerry DiPoto and his career, and also in the front office. I like what he's done with Seattle, and Seattle's one of the best teams in the game, despite losing 2 or 3 from the Mets. McLean reminds me, in 1987, anecdotally here, 1987, we traded Ed Hearn, a backup catcher, for this kid from Kansas City. His name was David Cohn. None of us knew him. He came over, and he pitched the last game in spring training. Literally, he came over the day before we were leaving spring training to go back up north. And he pitched against the St. Louis Cardinals, struck out 7 or 8 in 3 innings. And we said to ourselves, and this is no slight to Ed Hearn, who played a big part in '86 when Gary Carter was hurt. How did we get this kid for Ed Hearn? I mean, it's not possible that we could get this kid. He spun the ball on that first time I ever saw him on a Al Lang field in St. Petersburg, Florida. And we had Dwight Gooden, Sid Fernandez, myself, Bobby Ojeda, Rick Aguilera. I can go on and on. The names go on. Randy Myers was in that camp. David West, on and on. Never saw a guy spin a ball like that. And that includes Dwight. Dwight had an amazing breaking ball, but David had an innate ability to spin it. He must have been able to spin it when he was 10 years old. I had never asked him, but I should. That's what Nolan McLean looked like to me. He looked like a young David Cohn out there. I mean, that's the only memory I had as I was watching him pitch. And he does some really good things. It wasn't a perfect outing, but who's going to be perfect when you're 24 years old and just starting your major league career. But he has got the foundation of a possible some real solid, great years maybe coming up. And why do I say that? I watch pitching all the time. You guys do too. And every once in a while, someone comes up, and you don't know if they're going to be successful or not. But you got to have that foundation of greatness, and he has that.
I talked to Matt Holliday, one of his coaches at Oklahoma State, and one of the first things he said to me, this is before the debut of McLean, was that he threw a baseball like a wiffle ball. They noticed it right away as he came up, and he could hit the ball, by the way, a ton, which is why he was called Cowboy Ohtani in Oklahoma State. Of course, in the minor leagues, he batted about 185, and he struck out more than half the at-bats. So it's not easy to do both. Ohtani is one of a kind. But I want to ask you, generally, and I know you're in the major leagues. Tong was not at the major league camp. Sproat we saw briefly, but generally, are teams too cautious, not cautious enough about bringing guys up? Because the fans were clamoring for a while for McLean. Not that they know better than the team. I don't know if you saw Tong. If you have, you can go ahead and give your opinion, or Sproat. But are teams generally too cautious about bringing guys up? And my thought was, Tong is dominating like this in the minors. Let's see what he can do. This team needs something. Bring him up too. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think fans are always less cautious than teams. They always want to see. And I don't know. I said this on air the other day. I think Mets fans covet their prospects as a fan base more than any team in baseball. They just can't wait for those guys to get up to the major leagues. Caution. Why is there caution? There's caution because they don't want these young pitchers to come up when they're not ready to stay there forever. It looks like they made the right decision with McLean. Sproat, I'm sure, is going to be here at some point, maybe September 1st. Tong is the tough part. And I've seen all the guys pitch. I've seen Tong a few times. Tong is this generation's Tim Lincecum, a smallish guy with a whirlwind kind of wind-up and delivery. Very difficult for the hitters to pick up. He's got everything you need to be great. And we'll see how that goes. I would say that I would be shocked if he were called up this year. But I think Sproat will definitely be called up. And Sproat probably has the better velocity of all, probably the best velocity of anyone they have in the minor leagues. But he can't spin it the way McLean can. People, when they think of guys coming up now, I think because of all the numbers, they feel like if a guy throws 100, he's going to be successful here. But, you have to be able to cover first. You have to be able to manage the run game. You have to do a lot of things in the major leagues. And you got to check all those boxes before you get here, or you're just going to end up being embarrassed. Who wants to be embarrassed on this stage? So Sproat, you'll see. Tong, I'd be shocked if you see. But they both are going to be in the major leagues for the Mets, maybe as soon as next year. Tong could be, next year's Dwight Gooden. Come out of nowhere, so young, not come out of nowhere, but, make the team out of nowhere and help them next year.
Yeah, you talk about pitchers who have the ability to make it. I mean, I thought as much as spinning the ball, if you could read poise on a player, I thought we could read that on McLean. The athleticism comes off of him. And so add all of that to a 6'4" frame and someone who could spin it like David Cone. That's really impressive. And I will point out, because you pointed out the group you were with, which is Doc and Fernandez and Aguilera and Cone. You go back in Mets history, it was Seaver, Kuzman, Gentry, Ryan. In the mid-2010s, it's Syndergaard, Harvey, DeGrom, Matz. Wheeler was on the side there, but that's what did it. Unfortunately, there's one bad cluster in history. It's the Generation K guys. It's Wilson, Pulsifer, Isringhausen didn't work out. I wonder what you think about that, because you mentioned you think all these guys will be here no later than probably early next season.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something about a young group, because you were part of a young group that won the last championship in Mets history, that pitching group that kind of flourished together, starting pitching group? Is there something valuable about that? The Mariners have it to some degree, right?
Oh, they have it to the nth degree. They really have every guy they throw out there is young and so well and so polished. I think when you talk about the first two, Seaver, Kuzman, Ryan, Gentry, etc., and then the '80s versions, they weren't promoted too much before they got together. And once they performed, then they were talked about a lot. Generation K, unfortunately, was talked a lot before they performed, and sometimes that's the kiss of death, right? And Syndergaard, DeGrom, and Harvey, they're as good as any group I've ever seen. They just didn't last too long. And if Wheeler, I got to include Wheeler in that group. If you look at the stats from that time, very rarely did they pitch as a full group, if you include Matz in that group. The one thing, if you look at the '80s team and the '60s teams, was all of those pitchers were pitched all the time. There were very, very few injuries. Especially, and this is a day and age before they're supposed to know everything about taking care of pitchers and injuries. I mean, if they were honest, they really know nothing because the pitchers just keep getting injured. So that was the best part about playing on those '80s teams. And I'm hoping that Sproat and McLean and Tong have the same thing. And that is, there's different fraternities within each team. There's the bullpen guys. There's the offense guys who play every day, and there's the starting pitchers. And I was so fortunate to be with Doc and Ojeda and Aguilera and Cone and Fernandez and all those guys, not only talking pitching in between starts, but more importantly, getting a blueprint for success each and every night by watching these talented pitchers pitch. You just felt like you had to do your part to keep up, and that's a good place to be when you're a starting staff.
You mentioned the reliability and the innings and all the consistency of those '60s and '80s groups. And I mean, the Mets are not alone now with all these pitching injuries. It's an epidemic throughout baseball. Whoever figures it out is going to be probably richer than Steve Cohen. But I'll ask you what your theory is. What should we do about this epidemic that is really hurting baseball? The injuries to all of these pitchers.
I wish us three were smart enough, then we wouldn't have to do any more Zooms, right? We would just have to Florida or something. No, injuries to pitchers. We train them for 100-yard dashes in a sport that demands marathon. I mean, that's the first case. I think also these kids are taught at a very young age that velocity is king, not pitchability. If you're 17 years old, and you can throw 93 miles an hour, someone's going to give you $8 million. I don't know how we decentivize that, John. That's always going to be the case. So we're in a place now where velocity wins over pitchability. And I think a lot of teams feel like if I just get this kid, I'll teach him how to throw strikes and how to spin the ball. We notice that isn't always the case. And then I'll take one guy in particular, and I'm not pointing him out. Paul Skeens, I just love watching him pitch. He's 6'1,000", weighs 250 pounds of muscle. And he goes out there, and for him not to be pushed more, I think is not good for the sport. It's not good for Paul Skeens. Think about it this way. If we reverse it, if Tom Seaver was drafted from USC today, he would be sent to the minor leagues. He would have a pitch count of 40 or 50 his first year in rookie ball. They might get it up to 70 or 75 his second year. He'd make the big leagues, and all of his 61 shutouts would be gone. All of his 250 plus innings per year would be gone. He'd probably keep the Cy Young because he would probably, in the 6 innings they will allow him to pitch, he would give up 0 runs as opposed to maybe 1 or 2 runs. But that's kind of what we're doing to the best talent in our game. We've wasted the greatest talent, the strongest talent. I go in the clubhouse, guys tower over me. I'm 6'4" plus. These are the biggest, most strapping, strongest pitching athletes we've ever had. We've wasted an entire generation because we're trying to be careful with something that never needed to be careful with at all. Are we going to have injuries that take guys out? That's part of sports. It always has been. It's part of the Darwinian thing of sports. But shame on baseball. You can play, any generation can play the sport any way you want. But when you've wasted a generation of talent, To me, that's a shame.
I feel like that statement you just made needs an amen, so I'll do it. Amen. And I think it demands a follow-up question, which
Sure.
is, Ron, like in a Moneyball era where you're always looking for inefficiency, where can I do something that somebody else isn't? You mentioned Paul Skeens. He plays with the Pirates. They haven't been relevant since like Willie Stargell played with the team, right? Uh, why
Barry,
not?
they did have Barry Bonds.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll
okay.
give them
Okay,
that.
all right. So since Barry Bonds or Garrett Cole 10 years ago, essentially they stopped trying 10 years ago.
Hmm.
All right. Why not try to zig when everyone's zagging? Do you think it could actually be done? Do you think you could run a minor league system and say, I'm going to incentivize new ways of being promoted from A to double A to triple A, and triple A to the majors? Or by the time you get that piece of clay at either 17 or 21, high school, etc., it's too late. You can't teach guys to become marathoners because they spent the first formative years learning how to be sprinters.
Yeah, that's a great question. Can it be done? 100%. It would take a real brave organization, or maybe not that brave. I mean, if you're floundering, why not? I'm told all the time that teams are trying to win on the margins, right? This is the greatest margin that hasn't been tapped in maybe the history of this sport. Um, Teams that always talk about that they are small market teams. They don't have the revenue of larger markets. That certainly would be a place they could go. I don't think it's too late, but there are a lot of problems with it. One you talked about, by the time you get that lump of clay, can you form it and reform it back to 125 pitches a game? You're not asking for a lot. You're asking to go from 100, 105 to 20 more pitches per game. That really would solve the problem and solve the issue. The other thing is the agent and the player. We saw recently with Josh Hader, Josh, rightfully so, trying to protect himself to make sure that he got the contract he deserved without getting injured for another organization before those 6 years came up. Every agent in the ball game is trying to make sure that their player, especially pitchers, we're talking about pitchers now, are taken care of so that when they get to the 6 years, they're healthy and ready to go. So there are a lot of factors that are working against it. But if you were an incredibly brave organization and you decided to mix not only your analytics, but you mix them with eyeballs, guys who know the game, and do it with some of the best training people to train these people to do it, train these talented pitchers to go 125 pitches. That'd be 20, 25 more. You're asking of pitchers in today's game where most staffs have 6-man rotations, not 5-man rotations. So you have an extra day. That's not too much to ask. And that's from someone that used to do it. I used to do it on 3 or 4 days rest. Not talking about, we're not talking about Clemens or the most elite pitchers of the game. I was a steadfast, workmanlike pitcher, and I would thrive in today's game if someone took me to that path. And there's got to be more like me.
I think you're better than workmanlike, but very good. This will be my last question, and we thank you again for coming on. You are between you and Michael Kay, probably our most frequent guest, and certainly one of our most favorite guests. And I'm going to ask a question a little different than the one we usually ask, which is, what a great mix booth that you have, the Gary, Keith, and Ron booth, arguably the best in baseball. I think a lot of people think you're the best, but I'll say arguably the best. As I said, Michael Kay, and you are our most frequent guests and famous favorite guests. I want to ask you, in all this period, I know you and Keith are holding up okay. How is Gary doing? He probably hiding it on air. He seems okay. Is he holding up okay? Because I know he lives and dies with this team.
He is holding up okay. I think this has been a challenging year for everyone. But Gary lives and dies. I don't think he feels like that, but I know sitting next to him, he loves this organization, loves the team, and doesn't suffer fools gladly. You guys know that. So especially when they turn it around, he will be punching his calls like never before. I was kiddingly saying to the other day to people who watch our show, and there's so many good broadcasts out there. The boys in San Francisco, I could listen to them every single night. I don't know. Some nights were highbrow, some nights were incredibly lowbrow, which makes us kind of unibrow. But I think for us, we're just kind of a free-form jazz kind of trio that, depending upon the game, one person's going to have the floor, and we're very happy to let that person have the floor. It's the most generous booth I've ever been in. I'm in more booths than anyone probably in the history of the game, and it's also at one point, and don't tell anybody, I get to watch baseball games with two guys that are like my older brothers, and someone pays me for that. Everyone always desires to do something, and I know you guys are in this boat too. Do something you love. We tell our kids, make sure you're passionate about something and do something that you love. Well, us three probably are in something that and we love. And the bottom line of all this for you, Joel, and for John and for myself in the booth is that we love baseball. That's where it all comes from. If there's any anxiety or tension, it's because we love the game and we really want the game to be the best version of itself. And most of the times it is. When it isn't, we try to point it out, either in print or in the booth.
Ron, when you're turning 65, it's good to still be able to call two other guys your older brother, just for the record. I do wonder then, as a way to end this, we mentioned your birthday a few times. Anybody who'll be watching this on the sports New York Post Sports YouTube page will notice you're obviously not home. You're on the road. I assume it's a hotel room in DC.
Detroit, yeah.
Detroit. Is TBS?
Yes.
Yes. So yes, Ron's booths run amok. He's all over the place. You clearly have passion. Your insights are as crisp as ever. How as a way to end this, how long do you want to keep doing this?
Boy, that's a really interesting question. As time has gone on, when I was a kid, I always thought that everyone, retired at 62 or 62 to 65. My dad, who was a foreman in a machine shop, worked every day till he was 72. So he gave me a little bounce pass into maybe that's where I'm going to go. I don't know. I think I'll say this. This probably makes the most sense. When the baseball closed down in 1994, I was at the end of my career. I came back and played against my own wishes. I knew I should not have come back and played. The baseball love for me as a player was gone. And I made sure, I told myself about 5 years ago, when that happens here, I'm going to go out before that happens, as opposed to as a player. And most players do this after a hit had gone. So I don't know how long, but I just love what I do. I love coming to the park. Like most jobs, I don't appreciate anything before or after. But when 7:10 comes and the anthem is just played, and you never know what you're going to get, you could be at the ballpark with a losing team on June 1st at Citi Field, and one of the princes or kings of the game throws a no-hitter, and Johan Santana that night. You just don't know what's going to happen, and that's probably why all three of us still do it.
Well, Ron, selfishly, we hope the love continues for a long time. There's few people I would say this about, but every time I turn you on, whatever network it is, ours, MLB Network, TBS, SNY, etc., I learn something and enjoy spending time with you when I'm not even with you, and I certainly love spending time with you. And John pointed it out. You're one of our most frequent guests. We always appreciate it. Thank you so much, and happy birthday, Ron Darling.
Well, let's keep that frequency. I love doing the show. I love you guys, and take care.
John and I, of course, thank Ron Darling for joining us on the show. John, hit or error?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a hit or an error. I'll say it's a hit for the media finally picking up on the idea that there may be a realignment in baseball. Manfred has mentioned this a few times, and we're finally talking about it. It's a big subject, particularly since it will, presumably if you have 32 teams, you're going to have uh, 8 divisions of 4, and you might have 2 New York teams. So it's a big story, and I'm glad we're finally talking about it. To me, it's a big deal. Are the Mets and the Yankees going to be in the same division? I mean, it is logical. It makes sense if you get the 2 teams. I'm not sure when we're getting the 2 new teams. I believe, obviously it will be Nashville, very likely, and then maybe Salt Lake. I don't know. We'll
Yeah.
see. Uh, I I like the idea of 8 teams with 8 divisions with 4 teams each. I think that would be great. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the Mets and Yankees in the same division, though. I'm a little down on that, but I'm giving a hit for us for finally realizing this will be a big deal when it happens.
I don't know if I have enough bandwidth for that. I have to live through us missing a year of baseball because they can't agree to a new CBA before we get there. So,
Oh, they'll agree. They'll agree. They'll just yell at each other for a year and a half.
all right. Well, I hope you're right about that, John. I'm going to call this a hit. I find that, sometimes, me, I love digging into minutia and I find crazy things. So in the history of baseball until this year, John, you're going to laugh. There had only been 2 players whose last names were Seymour, Seymour. One was Jake Seymour in the 1800s. The other was Cy Seymour, who last played in July of 2000 of 1913. Do you know that there's been 3 players this year who've made their debuts? Carson, Ian, and Bob Seymour, who were born 71 days apart and made their debuts 68 days apart. They're all named Seymours, who are the first Seymours, 71 days, 68 days, 112 years since the last Seymour played in the major league. And these 3 guys, who are not related, I could tell, were born within a little over 2 months and made their debuts a little over 2 months. So I'm going to give a hit to Seymour's because I just looked at I looked at a list of debuts this year who made debuts, and I noticed there's 3 Seymours. I said, that's bizarre. Has there ever been a Seymour before in the history? And so I went down a wormhole.
Yeah, I'll give you a hit to you for noticing that. I don't think anybody else in the world noticed that.
Yeah.
I care. I'm not sure how many other people. I think that's very interesting. I will give a shout out to the most famous baseball Seymour of the last, who that is, right?
Seawolf.
Who is it?
Seymour Seawolf, right from Elias?
Oh,
Cy Seymour.
Seymour, Seawolf. Oh, that's a great one. I was thinking of a different baseball related Seymour, and that is Seymour Wiener, who
Oh,
passed
yes.
away. Unfortunately, I think he was about 100 years old. So amazing job by him there, and certainly, Mets fans who are remembering how great last year was and not this year, they're all thinking of different reasons, and I added to that with my own stupid tweet about bring back, what did I say? Bring back Piano Man or OMG or something else that seems to be out now. But this is part of the reason the fans don't think their team is doing that well. We had Seymour Wiener last year. We had Grimace. We had all this other stuff. Anyway, Seymour Wiener was a great Mets character for those watching outside of New York. That he was honored last year. A big Mets fan, and unfortunately, he had passed away at around 100. So, yeah, it's a nice tribute to all the Seymours. But Seymour Seawoff from Elias, he was almost 100 too when he passed away, and he was a pillar in baseball. You're right about that.
Yeah. John, ready for the dad joke? One of the reasons people get to see more of us is Tommy Hogan. Uh, that's
That's a bad one. All
that's a
right.
bad one. That's our great producer. Thanks always to Tommy, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate and review us. The New York Post the New York Post Sports YouTube page. Give us a view, and please continue to stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.